The next thing to do is make a fly-through using the same basic movie-making techniques to create a series of individual virtual camera shots along a predetermined path around or through elements in a design. When viewed as a movie, the camera appears to be flying around the model. I'm going to use the same elements as before, except I've added some color to both the block and the slab. Now we need to be in construction mode here, so make sure that construction is on, and that construction is on in view attributes. I'm going to draw a curve as the path. Now to do that, I'm going to use the B-Splines tool, and I am going to use CapMill ROM, which is quite a nice smooth path, and it'll be points, so I'll be picking data points. I want to start the path directly above this point here and somewhere above the top of the slab. So I'm going to put my compass right there, make sure I'm in vertical alignment, zoom upwards, a little bit above the slab, and data point to start the path there. Now I'm going to switch to top orientation because I want this path to be in the horizontal plane. Zoom out a little bit. Now all I have to do now is to start building a path around this object, which will allow me to see it from different points of view and come back to my starting point more or less here. So there's my path. Now I'm going to start the fly-through producer tool, and again utilities and render and fly-through. Pops the dialog box, and let's look at the settings. Camera settings first. I have a wide-angle lens. I'm going to change that to a normal lens this time. The clip back and clip front distance starters are just fine. Leave those alone. Target position is fixed, meaning that the camera will be pointing at one spot on my elements all the time. If I use floating, then the camera would be aiming along the line of the path, but not necessarily at my model. So fixed it is. View is 2, that's correct. Don't want a title. I'm using smooth mode this time, rather than Luxology. It'll be a little quicker for what we need right now. Everything else is much the same. Number of frames, I'm going to increase that. Since I'm using smooth mode, I can afford to add more frames. I'm going to go to 40 frames and enter that, and we're done. Now next I go to Tools and define the path. So I need to tell MicroStation where my path is, and follow the prompts in the status line. Identify the element at the path beginning, that's here. So I'm going to manually data point on that point. Now it wants the end of the path, manually data point on that. And now it wants to know where the target point is. In other words, where is the camera pointing? I'm going to manually snap on that front corner of the slab. And immediately I see the first frame of the video. Now I'm going to turn off constructions because I don't want to see the path in the actual video itself. Now right now I could flip through each frame in turn with my slider at the bottom of this box. But if I just simply click on the arrow, I can see where the frames will be generated and what I will see in each frame. So far so good. Up to Tools, and now let's record. Same path. You might find the previous still shots that we did earlier, but you can ignore those because this will be a different format. In fact, we're into the FLI animation format, so leave that as FLI. Accept the path, and we'll say OK. There, we see the whole movie very quickly. Now let's go through and look at the movie itself. So, Utilities, and Image, and Movies, and we'll load the file. It's the FLI, so that's automatically selected. We'll say OK. Up pops our usual video display. We'll run the video, and we see all 30 frames really quite quickly. So let's go to Settings again, and Playback, and change it to our typical, well, let's make it 20. There, now it's moving much slower. Now, of course, again, it's jerky because we're seeing individual frames spaced relatively far apart. As always, the smoother the movie is, the more frames you need and the more processing time, which is why I use smooth just for our purposes. But you get the idea. Now, as I mentioned previously, the camera is always looking at the target point, and you can't have the camera pan in different directions during the movie. If you need to pan the camera along a path, you must use the more flexible animation tool, which is not covered in this course. So experiment with the fly-through producer and its settings, and as I suggested in the previous video, try making a movie around and through the house model from the previous video series. There are also some further solar studies you can make. Take a look at the Utilities Solar Analyzer and Solar Exposure Calculator, which calculates the amount of solar radiation received by a model, and the Solar Shadow Generator tool, which draws the boundaries of solar shadows in a model.